Like, I wouldn't think to have a community space on my property. It's just not the way my brain operates. But it really challenged me, and it really made me think as well.
No, of course. Every little impact has the potential to have a big impact, doesn't it? I mean, we've seen that so many times where just one little thing at the right time.
You know what I mean? Just finding your people so that you don't put yourself in that situation, and that if you are bartering or trading or you're giving stuff away, you know, you're doing it with an open hand.
Women on a Green Mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we will be sharing how we and others apply the ethics and principles of permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, learning and fumbling our way to a greener life. You're guaranteed to witness a few successes, plenty of failures, laughs and swearing. We'd love your company along the way.
You're listening to the Practical Permaculture Podcast with Jo Flintham and Elise Gallagher. Hey, Jo.
Hey, Elise. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's so good to be back recording.
I know. We're just saying before we jumped on, it feels like ages since we've actually recorded an episode, because we did a massive bulk of them around Christmas. And have we even recorded since Christmas? No.
Oh, I don't know. I know we caught up. And we had our little catch up in our chats. But yeah, I don't think we've recorded since then. So yeah, it's good to be back on.
So we're getting to the end of season 1.
I know.
I can't believe it. And we'll be recording season 2 before we know it. So if anybody has any... I know, it's so fast. 15 episodes.
Far out. Go us.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, if anybody has anything that they want us to talk about in season 2, or people that would be interesting to talk to, send them our way, tag them in Instagram, or make them join our group and force them to interact with us, and we'll hunt them down.
Put the thumb screws on them, man. Like, just make them interact. I love that. But no, it's good. We'd really love that feedback, and you know, because we want to be able to deliver what you want. You know, what the audience wants. We're sort of having a little bit of a guess at, you know, hey, we think this is the sort of content that people like. So yeah, if there's something in particular that you like, let us know. As you said, Elise, you know, if there's a particular person that you would like us to interview, or, you know, even if you want to see a bit of a different format, we are going to trial and play around with a bit of a different format next season, aren't we?
Yes, we've got some mini episodes coming that are kind of tips, techniques, hacks, those kinds of things, and they'll just be shorter episodes that we release every week alongside our long format episodes.
Yep, and that's really just in that vein of the practical side of the permaculture of, you know, it's not going to apply to everyone in every situation, in every context, but hopefully with those practical elements of the how-tos, people can just take away the tidbits that they need for their particular situation. So that's the idea behind that.
Yeah, that was Jo's idea. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Let's go with it. But how have you been? What have you been up to since it's been so long since we've been recorded? Yeah, you've been tripping around all over the place. Where are you now?
Yes, so we're down near Tomakin on the south coast of New South Wales. I'm coming to you live from my car because my children and husband are in our caravan. It's been raining the last 3 days, so I got here very ambitious, did like 5 loads of laundry, and then it proceeded to rain for 3 days straight. So we've got all this wet laundry hanging up everywhere. The kids are a bit bonkers. So I thought, you know what, the car's probably the safest bet to record. So excuse the lovely aesthetics of my background today, but
hey,
it's
your
do what
mobile
works.
Recording studio, right? That's what it is. Mobile recording studio.
Yeah. And so we're just kind of down here, about to turn around, head back up north, and then start the block. So we've only got, I think, 3 weeks till we land on the block, and we're going to ferociously be doing fencing because my mum has a dog that she had to give away because she's going traveling for the next couple of years, and that dog has been used in a breeding program. He's a border collie, and they've had puppies. So we get a free little puppy.
big.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the kids don't know about it. It's a surprise. So we'll have Dave, our Labrador, and our new little border collie, a black and white one, and we're going to name him Frank.
Oh, you're going to have a Frank. We'll both have
Yeah,
Franks.
Frank.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. So
Oh,
Frank's going
Frank
to
and
join our
Dave.
family. Yeah. So we've got to get up there and get the fences done because he's due to come to us, I think, just before Easter. So yes, we need to get all that done so that he's secure and safe, and probably come up with some kind of weather shelter, because I don't think 4 humans and 2 dogs in a caravan is very feasible long term coming into winter.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. You're going to need to be doing some planning there and some construction work. Absolutely.
Luckily, Oscar's granddad's coming to join us. They live in a caravan part-time too, so they're going to park up for, I think, at least a month and just help out and try and at least look after the kids, or grandma can hang out with the kids and we can all go do a bit of work and try and juggle and trying to wrangle some of our family to join us for Easter, under the proviso that they help out with the fencing and some structures and things. So we'll feed you.
Along.
Yeah, BYO housing, but we'll feed you and you need to help.
That's the conditions. And look, fair enough too. It's just an extended working bee. That's what it is.
And how about you? What have you been up to?
Oh, well, I've been smacking my husband in the face with a shovel.
Oh my God, this
he
story's
got in the
hilarious.
way, and I just decided no.
Joe told me, and I was like, was it on purpose or accidentally?
I can absolutely guarantee everyone it was totally by accident. No, there was someone locally that was giving away some Yuki mulch that where they'd obviously had a tree chipped and it's been sitting there for ages, and they said, yeah, look, you just come and pick it up. So we were there this morning frantically trying to get a couple of loads done before the sun reappeared, because it's so hot and humid here. And I was just head down with my hat on and just focused on shoveling this mulch into the back of the trailer, and he decided to grab the rake and just rake up a few of the dregs, the drop bits, and we just collided. So he's not too injured. He's got a little bit of a mark on his face, and he's a little bit swollen and bruised, but it could have been a lot worse. But, oh my goodness, I felt so bad. But at the same time, I went, oh my goodness, are you okay? I'm so sorry. That instantly turned into, what the hell did you do?
Why did you walk in front of my shovel? Poor ants.
But he is okay, and we did get our 2 loads of mulch, so that was our
that's the main thing. We got the free mulch.
But yeah, we've been doing that. We've got permaculture at the pub happening this Thursday night, which we're really excited about. So we did speak, anyone that's listened to our episode with Will and Anthea from Maplewood, we did talk about permaculture at the pub, and that was something that they started to really get, that community connection and those like-hearted people together in an informal way. Like, there's no speakers, there's no program or planning that goes into it. It's basically this time at this place, come along. If you want a meal, if you want to have a beer, if you want to have a glass of water, whatever, like, just come along. And there can be anyone. You don't have to be into permaculture to come along. It can be that, you're just interested in living a better life, or you're into sustainability, or you're into social movements, or whatever it is. Obviously, if you're, a bit of a, I don't know, a rev head, and you're into motor racing and using heavy fossil fuels and don't really, care about the environment, it may not be your place. It's not really that type of space. But it's really about bringing those like-hearted people together, just in a really casual way. So they host them out at Patterson and at Dungog. I think they do 2 different pubs at Dungog, and talking about expanding. So we're bringing it to our part of the Hunter, and it looks like we've got a really good response so far.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited. I think it'll be really good.
Yeah, and they said when they have it, people from all different backgrounds come. Like, there's architects and farmers and teachers and stay-at-home mums and all these different perspectives that come and bring different things. And they said what's been really cool is that people then go, oh, well, I can show you how to do this or help you with this or give you advice on that. And then they kind of build that network, which is really cool.
I mean, yeah, some of the conversations that I had are just amazing. You wouldn't normally, have that opportunity to be having those conversations with those people, unless you generally go along to, a course or a workshop or something like that. That's usually, maybe a produce share or something like that. But it's usually something that's a little bit more structured. So to be able to just have that casual environment to have those conversations, with such a diverse group of people, and everyone brings something. So, I know last time when we went, I was chatting to a lady who had just moved to the area, and she said, "Oh, I think I'm in the wrong place. Like I can't bring anything, she meant like from knowledge or experience." And I said, "You're here. It's yourself. You're bringing yourself along. Like that is enough. You don't have to have a wealth of knowledge and experience, or like it's not about that. It's just about being able to have conversations and connecting and ask questions and who knows?
But also,
you just never know what you've got to share.
Yeah. Also, like, imagine if you did a perma blitz. Like, she might not be able-bodied enough to help, but maybe she could watch the kids while other people got things done. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't think it has to be permaculture garden-based to be able to help necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, that's still your piece of the puzzle that you're playing a part in that community.
That's it. It's connection.
Or like she might know the person at the local hall to host like a big Christmas function, or you know what I mean? Like it's just those networks that you build.
Yeah. Yep, you bang on. Absolutely bang on. So so we're looking forward to that. So our very first one.
Exciting.
Yeah, at the pub, and then it'll be every month from there. So we're doing every second Thursday of the month, and we'll be there.
Woohoo! I want to come and plan a trip just so I can be there.
Oh, I know. It was just poor timing because you're actually coming up to my place this weekend.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll just miss it. We'll still be in Wollongong on Thursday, unfortunately. So what pub are you hosting it at for everybody out there?
So it's going to be at the Hunter Brew House at Nalkaba.
Yep.
So it used to be the old Potter's Brewery, and then it's been through about 5 different name changes, I think. So anyone who's local will know. Yeah.
Yeah, you put a link in our little group anyway, so you can jump on there and we can share it in our stories too. By the time this goes out, you would have missed the first one, but obviously there's the next month coming up.
Absolutely. We just keep rolling them through. And the other thing too is if there's anyone that's listening that is interested in hosting their own permaculture at the pub, jump onto the Permaculture at the Pub page. I think it's page or group. I'm not sure how they've set it up. Jump on and contact Will and Anthea and have a conversation with them. So, there's always opportunities there to be able to, start something similar in your own area as well. So we can, get it out there and share it around.
Yeah, awesome. So today's episode, we're doing the last ethic, which is fair share.
And before we do that, because we almost forgot,
sorry.
What country are you on? We want to acknowledge where we're
recording from. Yes. See, it's been way too long since we recorded and I've forgotten what we're meant to be talking about. Down here, I'm on UN country. How about you?
So I'm recording from home, so I'm on Wannerua country.
Lovely. So yes, fair share.
Fair share. It was really interesting doing the research for this, I found. Like we were having a little chat before we were recording, and, there's a lot of different ways that fair share has been, I suppose, interpreted and has changed throughout the years. But I'd love to get your take first, Elise. What do you see as fair share?
Yeah, I think like for me on the most basic level, when I think of fair share, I think of me and how I can do it. So I think about, I've got too many lemons, I can share that. Or, just making sure that I can only take what I need in terms of buying things from the shops or, picking from a community garden, just super basic stuff. And I think that's more the kind of small scale of what fair share can be, because, the more I think about it and look into it and research it, you go, oh, it's more broader than that. But for me, that's really just the basics of how I live it in my everyday life. And I think that's also because it's how I can see me making the most immediate action the quickest way as well, that's happens instantly. So those kinds of ethics and principles, when I think about them, I often think, yeah, how can I have the most immediate and biggest impact for where I am right now? And I tend to not go too far outside that. Because for me, in my season, I'm a mum. I don't have time to be lobbying politicians, and I've got my own stuff going on. And so I just keep things really basic. So for me, that's kind of where I sit in that fair share sphere at the moment. What about you?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that you acknowledge the fact that, yeah, your bandwidth is X right now. Like, this is all you've got to play with, and you know what your capacity is, because, yeah, otherwise trying to be effective on a broader scale when you've got everything else going on, you just end up in overwhelm, and it gets, again, we've talked about this before, but it gets too big, too hard, and you
Yeah.
don't end up doing anything very effectively.
Like if I tell enough people what I'm doing, or I share enough of my knowledge, like, oh, have you thought about, where this comes from or what happens here? Or, if I can make enough little ripple effects, then I'm actually making quite a big impact as well. It doesn't have to be on this huge scale with policy or big corporations. If I can just do it at that grassroots level and reach lots of people, then maybe I will make a really big impact as well.
Yeah, of course. Every little impact has the potential to have a big impact, doesn't it? I mean, we've seen that so many times, where just one little thing at the right time with the right person, and all of a sudden, boom! It does have this ripple effect. So I think that, yeah, I don't think that, yeah, we need to, yeah, downplay that at all. I think that it's, being
True.
able to make those small
Yeah.
those small changes, and take those small actions. They're incredibly important, because that's where we need to be doing that on a daily basis. And that's what I was saying. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really similar to you. Like, for me, fair share's always just been, I don't know, like, even before I was introduced to permaculture, for me it was always, well, if I take too much of something, then that is going to limit somebody else. So why would I do that? That doesn't make sense to me. Why would I take 10 packets of toilet paper when I don't need 10 packets of toilet paper? When then someone else is going to miss out, and it's always just made sense to me that you take what you need, not what you can. You take what you need, and
Yes.
you give what you can.
Yes.
And sharing is too. It's not a swap or an exchange. It can be, you can always trade things, but it's not always reciprocal in the fact that you instantly get something back from that. It is about getting as much abundance out to other people in whatever that looks like. And we're going to talk about that this episode, on what that abundance can look like. But it's spreading that out as far and wide as possible. So basically, everyone's getting a slice of the pie. We all have a little slice, and we're all satisfied. We've had our slice of pie, but we can share that around more. I don't need to eat a whole pie. Not to say I haven't, but I like pie.
Yeah.
But that's what it's about for me.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think it's also more complicated than the other two, because it has had those different iterations over time that you made reference to before. So when you go back to the original meaning and definition, it was returning surplus to earth and people limits to growth, which is very different, I think, to, future care and fair share that we see today. I think it still has to do with those things, but I think that reframing of it as time goes on has definitely not complicated, but added levels to what that means and how people interpret and see it impacting their day-to-day life as well.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, yeah, even, Bill Mollison's original iteration talked about, limitations on population as well. And I know that's a subject that, a lot of people don't like to talk about, because that's a bit like, oh, that's, that's a big conversation to have. And I was reading some blogs and watching some videos, and it was really interesting, sort of different perspectives. And I, kept an open mind for it. And, you know, we're certainly not going to get into the politics in, you know, in this podcast, but it was just interesting to hear different perspectives and how people interpreted what that meant. You know, some people were very literal about it and were quite up in arms about it, and other people, you know, was a little bit more metaphorically and were able to maybe speak to that a little bit more openly. But I think, you know, there's limits to everything that we do. So that's sort of what I took from it, was there are limits to everything. So when you are growing, there's only so much growth that can happen before you hit some sort of limit. So when we're talking about growing a plant, you know, there's a life cycle of that. The plant only goes so big and so far before it hits its limit. We as humans grow so big and so far until we hit our limit. You know, we don't live to 500 years old. Thank goodness. No, I don't think anyone would want to. But we have an age limit. That age limit has extended, but there are, you know, over the last, you know, couple of centuries, but we still have a limit. And so understanding that there are limits to things can help you to moderate and modify your thoughts and your behaviors to allow that, I suppose, to allow for that cycle and to know where your limits are within the bigger, I don't know if I'm even making sense, but so understanding that there's limits. Totally. So there's limits to the food supply. So if we just look at our food supply, there's limits to, you know, what can be grown. There's limits to what can be produced. There's limits to what can be made, shipped, transported, put on shelves.
Totally. Yeah.
And so that means that there's limits to what we can then, you know, go in as our, you know, our little lemming selves and go in and buy these things off the shelf. So it's, if we understand that and we basically start to, you know, reduce our consumption, then it affects the whole system. Yeah.
And I think kind of on a tangent, like going off that road that you're kind of talking about, is also if we try not to get to the limit in the first place, then is the quality of what we're going to get be better as well? So like if we weren't expecting these things off our big supermarket chains, you know, we would get better quality produce. You know, if we did fair share properly on a smaller scale within our community, then we wouldn't have these expectations maybe for food grown in a non-ethical way or a non-regenerative way, or, you know, using science to like modify foods because we want it to grow healthier and those kinds of things because they can't keep up with demand. Like if we actually do fair share within our community and on a more smaller scale, I think that then increases the quality of what we're getting as well, because we're not pushing it beyond the limit of what's fair or what's available.
And then from there, that flows on to the value of the product, and whether that's its intrinsic value or it's you know, dollar value or whatever value gets placed on it, that has the potential to increase or decrease or stabilize because it is a finite amount. It's not, you know, it's not infinite. It's not going to be forever, but there's not this reduction in the amount as well. Like there's the right amount to make sure that there's enough for everyone that needs to have, you know, part of that.
Yeah. And when I was looking at our show notes too, the comment about then it being a fair price also and a fair deal for the farmers and the consumers, and how that affects, you know, supply chain and, you know, global food distribution in that sense in the economy, that, you know, we actually all are getting a better deal in quality and money and things being a bit more circular and being more in our community rather than being shipped off overseas and outsourced in different ways. So to me, that's a really high value that, you know, we go to these little towns, and I went today to the farmers markets and I went to the little IGA rather than traveling 10 minutes and going to Woolies where it would be cheaper, but, you know, and it hits my pocket harder, but I know in the long term, that's where my values sit too, that I can, you know, shop at a greengrocer or the farmers markets, or, you know, even I bought a jumper the other day and I bought it from a little lady who had a small shop, and there was a local person who made these jumpers rather than going to Target or, you know, something like that. And not saying that some of those big chains don't have better ethics than they used to, but just that concept of having a circular economy, keeping things at a smaller scale, lessening our food miles, clothing miles, etc. I think that's just really important to think about that more and
Yeah, and
more.
your money that you've spent has gone directly to the person who made the jumper. It's gone directly to the person who has sold you the jumper. And that money, because they're local people, is now staying in that local economy as well. It's not going
And
to a big corporation.
Yeah, and I hope it gives me good juju too, like that I've done that for somebody, so that when I have my little business one day, that other people will also value that, and that comes back to me at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And even when you're sort of talking about that, about the value, what came to mind for me, thinking about it from I suppose, an everyday level that we can all understand. Let's take milk as an example. So, in years gone by, we didn't have a ton of milk and cereal that we'd, pour our 2 liters of milk on, or that we would just necessarily guzzle, half a liter of milk, per person every day. So over the years, we've consumed, we went from, I know when I was a kid, you bought a liter of milk. Then you could buy 2 liters of milk, and that was huge. And then you could buy 3 liters of milk, and that was like, oh my goodness, that's taking up the whole drawer in my fridge. But the milk that's being produced is getting cheaper per litre. The farmers at the other end are having to produce a heap more milk at a much lesser rate, so they're getting less profit. They're now having to do more intensive farming, so they've got to keep, more cows, so more head per acre to be able to have the cows there, to be able to produce the milk. You've now got more trucks on the road who are going and picking up the dairy down the road here. There's trucks twice a day, picks up their milk. So imagine that's happening for every dairy. You've got more single-use plastics because you're now putting this milk in plastic. Like, the whole thing goes on. Now, if we as a society valued milk as something that was really precious and not just this thing that we are entitled to have, and we paid a little bit more for it, but we consumed a little bit less for it, and that balanced out, then the farmers would be able to produce a higher quality product, and they would also get paid better for it. That's a really simplistic theory. I know that there's a lot more involved in the middle there, but
it's a good example.
It's just, again, being aware. We don't need to have 3 liters of milk if you've got 2 people in the house.
Or even like Kelly and Anna from Urban Hum, they made the effort to use glass jars that were from Australia, that were really good quality. I know a lot of people, if you had the option between glass milk and plastic milk, you'd probably still buy the plastic, but changing our thoughts around our habits and our values, really important. And I think also that's where the government does step in sometimes to say, okay, well, no, you can only use high value plastics because we can actually recycle those. Or no, you need to start using no plastic. And that's why I think that government level, it becomes important, because without that pressure, a lot of companies wouldn't do these things. But I think if you buy with your conscious, then, your actions speak loud enough that it will happen, even if you don't, write to your local, member or whatever it is at a political level. So I think it's a really good point that you make, that definitely we are in a bit of a throwaway society, that we don't appreciate things. The kids' clothes, for instance, they're stained and they're gross, and they have farm clothes and they've got nice clothes. And if their farm clothes get a hole in them, then they get left with a hole in them, because does it really matter that their pants have a hole in them when they're climbing trees? Or I patch it up, or we stitch it up, or they get cut into shorts instead of pants, and life goes on. Like, who really cares? Like, we just spend so much money replacing things and buying and consuming, and not being conscious of what we're doing, and not thinking about the value in everyday things like eggs. I think eggs is a really good example. People are finding eggs really expensive and really hard to come by, and I think that's something that we've taken advantage of. And I think it's something that we take for granted, that you can get good farm raised eggs. And I know where we are, there's a local cafe that sells them, and I saw recently, just before Christmas, they'd stopped selling them because they were like, the farmers just don't want to do free range eggs because it's too expensive and they can't get enough money for it, and people just go buy 6 carton eggs at Woolies rather than pay the $8 or whatever it is for our
Oh,
farm
it's
raised
so
eggs. They've
sad.
just stopped. They sold all their chickens. They just got rid of all of them,
Oh
and
my
that's it. They're
goodness.
done. They closed up shop. Yeah. So even where
Yeah,
we are,
that's
they're getting eggs from like Byron Bay, and that's a good hour and a half, 2 hours away, when we've got all this land around us in the Clarence Valley that they could just be buying local eggs from these people.
yeah. Goodness, our girls have stopped laying at the moment because it's been so stupid hot. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
it's been so hot. And because as you know, we sell our eggs to the cafe, the local cafe, and I mean, we are very transparent with that. We sell them for $5 a dozen. They're all hand raised. It's organic as can be. They do get pellets because we do need to supplement feed because the poor little things would not last on our shitty pasture here. So we do supplement feed. As I've said before, we get green matter in from other areas as well, and they feed on that. But yeah, we sell them for $5 a dozen, and then Heather at the cafe, she will either use them in her baking, or when she on sells them, she puts a $2 markup on there, and that covers her costs for electricity and refrigeration and all the rest of it. But I mean, it's actually, I think she does too. She might have been $1.50. But yeah, I mean, that's for hand raised, hand collected, happy girls. And I mean, they always sell out. I haven't been able to supply anywhere near enough eggs for what they need, so they always sell out. But I know next door they sell eggs, and I'm not going to mention who from because I actually really like their operation. And we do get hens from them. They're a free range operation. We get hens from them once a year when they offload their girls that are no longer in full production. But they're selling for $12 a dozen retail.
Wow.
And yeah, I looked at that and went, $1 an egg, that's huge. But I do understand too, they are free range. They are completely free range. They are organic. Their whole setup is absolutely amazing. And obviously they need to be able to charge X amount to the shop that is selling them, and then they've got their markup on them as well. And I know that they deliver eggs, all around, the valley and Newcastle and all over the place. But I just sort of went, like that's a hard pill to swallow, because at $12 a dozen, you're right, people are walking across the road to the IGA, or they're getting in the car and they're driving to Coles, so they can go and buy their eggs for $7 a dozen or $6 a dozen.
And I don't know, like you were talking about milk before. So we went up to the Sunshine Coast to stay with Oscar's auntie and uncle, and I bought the Mulaney milk because it was a local milk. I knew it had low miles. It was just down the road and it was really good quality, blah, blah, blah. So I bought it, right? Anyway, poured the milk out for my morning coffee. And Oscar's uncle was like, "Oh, look who we got here, Miss Fancy Pants with her Mulaney milk, like her fancy milk kind of thing." And I was like, that's interesting too. Like, I didn't take offense to it. And I was like, well, I'd rather buy the Mulaney milk that's $9 or whatever it cost than, the $4 farmers market no-name brand that they sell, which is still great, like supporting Aussie farmers and everything. But I was kind of like, I wonder if people also don't or choose not to make those choices sometimes because there can be a stigma in your local group about, look at her, or especially when it comes to clothing, because clothing is so personal for people to, I know my stepmom, she's really not anti, but kind of not a fan necessarily of secondhand clothing. For
My
her,
mum's the
that's
same.
kind of, like a really big thing to think that our kids could be walking around in secondhand clothing, and that's how she was brought up, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with her thinking that, but I just wonder too, that stigma, how much it affects people's buying and that status that we see attached to things, or that tall poppy syndrome in particular that we have in Australia, to cut people down that we think are doing well. And, just because I'm buying $9 milk doesn't mean that we're millionaires. It's just that's where my values lie, and I'm going to have to go without in some other area because, or grow my own, or save money some other how, or barter, or whatever it is, because that's a top value for me and I'm choosing to do that. But I think if you don't have that centeredness, that can be a real thing that, you don't want to do it because you stick out, or you are that tall poppy, or you don't fit in, or you get judged, or, it's a tricky
it's
one to
interesting that you
navigate.
raise it. And I know that we're sort of going off topic a little bit again, but
Yeah.
but
it relates because
it
it's like,
does.
you want to make these choices, but part of choice is your social context and how people see you and how you fit in with your community or your family. Your family might not have the same values to you, your extended family. So how do you reconcile your choices and the way you live, with people around you and those feelings of judgment, or your choices as a consumer?
It's interesting because I was thinking about, recently I had, I'd made, some jams and some pickles, and I made some, zucchini cakes, and and I'd also given away some produce, and someone who was incredibly grateful for receiving some of that made a sort of, it was an odd comment, and I thought about it after. I thought, I wonder where that comes from. But they said, well, it's nice to be able to be in a position to just give away things. And I went, oh, and I took it as a compliment at first. I was like, yeah, you know what? It really is. It's a blessing. It's nice to be able to give things away that I've made or that I've grown. But it wasn't until later that I sort of rethought on that, and I thought, ooh, was
Is it
that
a
a little bit of
backhanded
a,
compliment?
yeah, was that a bit of a jibe? Like I was doing it to show off that, oh, look at me, I'm so good because I can do this. And I had a little bit of a laugh to myself, and I thought, well, isn't that funny? Because if it was, I didn't take it to be that. I just went, you know what? I'm really blessed because I'm able to be able to do that. How cool is that? Because when I need it, there's always been someone that's been there for me to be able to help me out as well. Like I haven't been in this position, all my life. So it's just those different phases and how people see it. So, it's, I suppose, on that judgment is that if you do feel judged, try, bit of an oxymoron, but if you do feel judged, try not to judge that person back, because they're coming at it from a totally different angle and perspective or stage of life, or there's
part
a
of their
thousand different
journey.
reasons.
Yeah, totally. And I think that kind of just shows also, I think, coming onto our next there's more we could talk about that global sense, but when we talk about that local sense of, then it also means really finding your kind of people. Like, just from being on the road, pardon me, we don't have a big community of people that we see regularly or face to face a lot that are the same people. But the people that we have met, like, we've been given sourdough starter from one lady that was like, from her grandma or something, that's been kept alive, and she shared with her friends, and we barely knew them. We had a fire with them one night in the caravan next to us, and our kids got along. And she sat me down and taught me how to make sourdough, gave me this big recipe with all the instructions and the measurements, and then gave me some sourdough starter. Like, you know what I mean? Just finding your people so that you don't put yourself in that situation, and that if you are bartering or trading or you're giving stuff away, you're doing it with an open hand, because it will come back in some other form, because you are supporting your community and locally and your kind of people, just networking with people that are like-hearted.
That's it. And it's, and that could be for anything, can't it? Like it doesn't matter what that is, whether it's, your time or your knowledge or your skills or a product or, it can be so many different things. Yeah.
And that's not to exclude others either. Like, I don't mean that as in, like, you find your people and nothing else matters. Like I said, I might give to somebody not knowing their story or their background, and you do so with an open hand, because it'll come back to you at some point, because that's your mentality and your belief. I don't think it is
Yeah,
about
there's no,
creating these enclaves and this closed door and you can't play
yeah,
with us kind of mentality. That's not what I meant by that either.
there's no criteria for
Mm,
being, yeah, for giving or receiving. You don't have to be a particular type of person or have a
yeah,
particular type of belief. It could just be that, yeah, you need, and I have the ability to meet that need in some way, or vice versa, and
yeah.
that's it. That's all it needs to be.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's the episode. I think we can just wrap it up there. We've talked about. No,
And
I'm
that's all we have to
joking.
say about that.
um, yeah, I suppose just on global fair share as well. Like, we're not just talking food production too, right? I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about things like technology. Like, we all use technology every day now. And I think
Mm.
technology, sometimes when we talk about permaculture, there's sometimes a bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
But open source technology is one that I really wanted to bring up. So it's fair share around knowledge and accessing different things that you wouldn't
Mm.
otherwise have access to. And these can be life saving or life improving technologies or medications. Like, we watched on, I think it was Australian Story on ABC. These two blokes that started up a friendship at university,
Mm.
and both of them were vision impaired, and
Right.
they kept having this conversation around, wouldn't it be great if we had some sort of technology that was available to everyone who was vision impaired, not one of these platforms that, cost thousands of dollars and you needed to apply for
Mm.
funding, or it was only a very select amount of people. Like, why can't we create something and put it out there to the whole world, open source, and so people can apply this, whether you are, you're 5 years old and you're vision impaired, or you're 55,
Yeah.
anyone can access this technology. And that's
Yeah.
what they did. They developed that. They're both
Wow.
computer programmers and coders, and I don't
Yeah.
live in that sphere, so I don't know if I'm using the right
Yeah.
terminology, but they were incredibly intelligent computer peoples. And
Yeah.
they were able to develop this technology. And there was a few people, like they said on the show, that, why don't you, start, you could really make a good income from this, and you
Mm.
could sell this off, and sell it to a bigger company who could push it out more. And they said, well, no, that defeats the purpose. We want this to
Mm.
be free, and we want anyone to be able to access this technology at any point in time, and we will continue to work. So they've set up a not-for-profit. They get
Wow.
funding from other sources, and they have committed that this will, as long as they are both alive, this will remain totally free and open technology. And it was such a beautiful story. So anyone in Australia that's interested, it's on
Wow, that's
Australian
cool.
Story. I can't remember the name of the two gentlemen, but yeah, go through, and if you scroll through, you'll find it. And I thought, well, that
Yeah.
is fair share. That is fair share.
Yeah.
It is not limiting someone's quality of life, will be able to just do the basics of life, of be able to communicate like everybody else. And
Mm.
why should they have to pay thousands of dollars to be able to just do the basics?
Yeah.
So I just went, yeah, this is what fair share means. And in a modern
Mm.
society, medication's another one. Why do
Yeah.
we have these huge pharmaceutical companies that are earning billions and billions of dollars, in profit every year, and the shareholders are, absolutely rolling in it? And I'm making assumptions here too.
Yeah.
But yet, a life-saving drug for a child is going to cost the family,
Mm.
$20,000-$30,000 a pop. It's
Mm.
like, this doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I'm the first to admit, like I don't think about it in that lens. Like my brain doesn't go there. But there's so much to it on that global scale for fair share. My brother talks about open source technology a lot because he's a little bit of a techie nerd, and it kind of just goes over my head. I get the principles of it, but yeah, I mean there is so much that we can do to have access to things.
Yeah. Yeah. And
For
just the,
sure.
and the basics, just the basics, and things that are going to improve our lives. And I'm not talking about
Mm.
improve our lives like, luxury items. I'm talking, yeah, the basics of
Yes.
being able to, read text on a computer. or be able to hear or be able to take, insulin, like the basics of life. Why should that cost? Everyone should have access to those basics, because that is fair share. I'm not talking about, having a nose job or a boob lift or a tummy tuck or something like that because of vanity. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't judge anyone for any of that. Like, I've looked at those sorts of things myself in the past when I've had moments, but I wouldn't expect that for free. So again, it's around, where is that quality of life and how is it improving for, either improving something for a human or for or the earth in some way. So there's lots of different ways.
I think that's why my brain goes to gardening so quickly, though, because I feel like that's such a fundamental thing, and also for your mental health, how amazing that is to have that access to food and be outdoors. Like when we were in Adelaide over Christmas, we went to the beach and there was on-street parking, so we parked, and there was this big complex of kind of like apartments, but not really, like townhouses. And between where the road was and the townhouses was probably about 250 meters. And then the whole complex went for probably about 600 meters. So there was a full, 250 by 600 space that was just lawn, all lawn. And I thought, you know what? Wollongong, when we lived in Wollongong, they did it really well. So many social enterprises that would probably love the opportunity to have access to that space, that they could maintain it, and that the people that lived there and that lived around the area could come and be in that space, and things that are low maintenance, like food foresty kind of things, all low shrub stuff that's not going to affect their sunlight and, negatively impact the people that are living there. And then, annual beds that people can access, and even just things like mint and herb, and increasing, flowering plants that are pollinating, and it was all just grass. And I thought, that's just someone having to mow that every single week in winter and every second week every second day in summer. That's a lawnmower. You're paying for the fuel for that. You're paying for someone's wages to do that, and it could just be more meaningful. And
absolutely.
again,
Not
that
to mention
concept
the
of
connection. The connection those people would have. I mean, I guarantee that some of those people wouldn't even know who they live next to, who they share an adjoining wall with. When you have these common spaces where people come together for a common good, that's where the connection happens. That's where you get to know people. You get to know that, you have an amazing neighbor, or that one's a bit weird over there, but, he's okay as well. But it does. It brings people together. Yeah.
And I think, you weird neighbor or whatnot, that trust building between people, I think that has a really big impact then on your ability to partake in fair share. Like, if he's a bit of a weirdo because he's actually, autistic, or he's really shy because he's had some bad life experiences, or, he's just a bit socially awkward, but he's harmless, you then are happy to connect or reach out or share or give him a, cutting of a seedling or a plant.
Story,
or, you know what I mean?
don't you?
I think that's such a big part of fair share, that connection, because without that, how can you do fair share? It just doesn't work.
You can't, and not unless you're sort of doing a drop and run.
Yeah.
But, I mean, then you don't know if people need things. So I'm making light of that, but you're absolutely bang on. So what are some other ways? So let's talk a little bit about local fair share.
Sure.
So we've talked a little bit about global, and again, I mean, there's so many more things that we could talk about, but we're all about the practical and what can we do in our own space with what we've got, with where we are right now. And again, we preface this with, you don't have to do it all. These are just different ways. We don't do all of these things necessarily.
Actually, that was
a lot at, at some stages of your life, you'll do a lot more than others.
That was a good quote when I was doing my research from this article. I'll have to put it in the show notes. It says, we need to focus on what is appropriate for us to do rather than what others should be doing. By finding the right balance in our own lives, we provide positive examples for others so that in turn they can find their own balance. And I really liked that, because I think we end up shoulding we should a lot on other people rather than just focusing on what we do and how we can impact it. So yeah, I'll put that up too, because I think that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the shooting.
Yeah, but we shouldn't ourselves, let alone other people. But yeah, I think if we just focus on our behaviors and what we do rather than shooting, I think that's a really good first start. But for me, fair share in my context, like I said, would be excess produce, when you're preserving and baking bread and cookies and things like that, sharing those things around, and also just sharing my gardening stuff as much as I can. So whether that's seedlings or plants or pups that come from other plants and things like that, propagating, they're kind of the main two ways I do fair share. But like I said, I think I have a very garden focused lens. What about you?
Garden definitely as well. And I just recently found, and I was messaging her before we got on, a lady at Greeter here who's got a little foodies free stall out the front. So it's a little food cart. And I had no idea she was there. I just happened upon it in one of the other community groups. And so I actually messaged her and said, hey, I'll drop some stuff off, when we've got excess. Is that okay? Do I need to let you know? She said, no, just come past and drop it off. And then I mentioned permaculture at the pub, and she said, yeah, I saw that you posted in the local community group, but I can't find the post again. Can you resend it to me? So she's going to come along as well. Nice. And it's that is awesome. And that's just from, that little food stall that she's got out the front, which is fantastic. Yeah. But for me, I do, that same as you, plants, cuttings, seeds, clothes is a big one for us. So every 6 months we go through our wardrobe. We do a big clean out. So if we haven't worn it, obviously if it's been in season, but if we haven't worn it, we're unlikely to wear it. We've outgrown it, which unfortunately is having a little bit too much these days. It's that pie that I was talking about earlier. It's getting.
Oh yeah, it's a good pie though.
It's a good pie.
That was worth.
I need to share my pie more. That's the thing. But yeah, so we basically go through, and when we first started doing this, we were really tentative because you'd have your favorite pieces. You're like, oh, but I might wear this again, and I really like this. I'm not going to wear it because it either doesn't fit or it doesn't feel right on or whatever. Yeah. But I really like it, so I'm going to hang on to it. And then we started forcing ourselves to go, if we are not going to utilize this, then why are we keeping it? Let's donate it. So we then go through anything that is basically still wearable. It goes into a donation bag, and that gets dropped off at, there's multiple, secondhand stores around. So whether it's, Vinnie's or wherever, we've sort of got a bit of a selection of where we go to, depending on when we're driving past.
Good. Yeah.
But then things like that are stained and ripped. So, like the kids' clothes that you're talking about, when it gets to that point that it cannot be saved anymore. We will either chop ours up and use ours for rags. The things that we don't chop up and use up for rags, then we give them to a place down here who will take spoiled clothes and either cut them up for rags, or you can take them into, I think it's H&M. And if you take a bag of clothing into H&M,
yes, they do. Yeah, they do that.
You get a credit. Like, I can't remember how much it is now. We haven't done that in a while. But if you're so that way inclined that you want to shop there, but they then take that fabric and they recycle that fabric and they make clothes out of it, and you can then buy recycled clothes from their stores as well. So there's we're really big on that. Nothing, like, we don't throw any fabrics whatsoever in the bin. Nothing ever goes to waste. So that's something that's big for us. And I think too, any household items, like we do same when we do a clean out, often, I'll jump onto Marketplace on Facebook or the local groups, and I'll just say, hey, I've got these items. Does anyone need them? So instead of necessarily taking them down to donation, I'll put it out to the community first and say, if anyone's in need of a spare computer monitor or whatever it is that we've decided that we just don't have a use for anymore. Some things I'll sell. Sometimes that money, if we sort of have a bit of a sale where we put a whole heap of stuff together, sometimes that money will then go back to a local charity, or goes into buying more chook feed here or whatever. So again, we're always mindful of what we're doing with our things, basically our items, and then what we're receiving back from that and where that result is going as well.
And I think that's a really good point that you made about having Marketplace or Gumtree, that people give away free stuff all the time. And when you are consuming, to think about where you can get some of these free resources before going and getting something that's made and off the shelf, and how you can kind of extend that longevity in an item by buying it secondhand or getting some recycled bricks as building materials and those kinds of things. I think a lot of that's going to be happening for us soon, just trying to find materials for the farm and trying to benefit from other people's fair share by trying to access some of those resources.
Yeah, and it's it's actually really awesome because what's the saying? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And I think with that, sort of on that tangent, we've lost a little bit of that as well, because things are so accessible and so cheap that we can just snap our fingers and, for relatively, again, everyone's situation is different, and I certainly appreciate that. But for, relative cost, it can be quite cheap. You can get exactly what you need delivered, smack bang to your door. Years gone by, you couldn't do that. You had to come up with things. And when you were talking about bricks, I remembered making a shelf in this little rental that I had. I needed extra shelves, but I couldn't afford to go and buy, these shelving units, or bookshelves or whatever. And being a rental, I couldn't screw into the walls. So there was some old bricks out the back, and I found some old planks of, I don't know, decking boards or what they were. And I just literally stacked them on the kitchen bench, and I made a little shelving unit, and all for free. And then, when I moved out, it all went back. It's, just little things like that. I think we've lost a little bit of that, but it's exciting when you get the opportunity to come up with those sort of solutions.
But I think that also comes back to that stigma again. Like, if someone comes to your house and they see that, to go, oh, that's a bit, instead of thinking, oh, it's a bit quirky, it's like, oh, Joe's got some shit lying around in her house kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think so much of it does actually come back to that, how people see us and how we feel like we're being judged, and stigma, and, trying to surround ourselves with people who lift us up and support us and are like-hearted, because that's what you need to kind of thrive in this setting.
We don't need it to be all shiny and new and perfect. We just need it to be something that's going to be functional and make us happy too. Like, I'm not talking about, we have to live on the bones of our ass and, not have anything new, or not enjoy anything. I mean, God, no. The opposite of that. It's around what you do derive enjoyment from, and being conscious of where, the things that you have in your life are coming from for that. And what you can share.
That losing touch of what, those joys. I'm reading a book and they're talking about, they'd have Swede soup watered down because it's like war times. And this lady just talks about how much she appreciates leeks now, because that just makes her Swede and vegetable soup taste so much more, luscious by having a leek in there. I think because of all this quick access, everything at our fingertips, we've lost that art of enjoying simplicity. And I think that's a big part of fair share, that overconsumption just because we can, and not consciously thinking and appreciating the milk, the eggs, the leek, like whatever it is, not appreciating that, my jeans are fine and I can wear them for 5 years and I can wear them 3 days in a row. And that's not a big deal. Like, I don't have to have a different pair of pants every time I see Joe because she's going to think something, or I'm going to feel a certain way because I'm wearing the same clothes that Joe saw me in last time. Like, we're just losing so much of that.
Yeah, we are. It's perspective, isn't it? When we start to change our perspective and change our thoughts, and coming back to what you're saying about values earlier, it helps us to reframe and make those decisions, I suppose.
Yeah, totally.
But I was going to move on to another
Yes.
thing around a fair share, and that's sharing time.
Yeah.
And I've got a few sort of things listed down. And I know that, yeah, before I go into those, like we were talking about I think it was, yeah, people care last time we were talking about giving your time to your family and making them a priority.
Mm.
But sharing your time can be, lots and lots of different things. So it can be volunteering. So you could be
Mm.
volunteering at your local community centre. It could be you're volunteering at a preschool or at an aged care facility, or it could be absolutely anything. Your local land care. There's so many places that need volunteers. The
Yeah.
SES, the RFS.
Yeah.
Um, there's
Or even
there's
more basic, like volunteering your time to go help your elderly neighbor. Like it doesn't even have to be with
yeah
an organization. My friend
yeah
and I, she would drop her kids off at my place instead of paying for childcare to just go and have some time with her youngest, to get more basic than that too.
yeah yeah it really can. It's just that giving of yourself of if you have that bit of time, if you can carve out that bit of time, and I know that we're all incredibly busy, and we
Mm.
have a lot of competing priorities, but just 5 minutes, like even on the neighbor analogy, having a chat to your neighbor over the fence. You see someone walk out to collect the mail, walk out and collect yours and say good day. That's it.
Mm.
Smile.
Yeah, we had this old lady that lived next to us in Wollongong, and when we went back the other day and drove past, we saw she was still there. Like it was beautiful to know
Oh,
that, yeah, Naomi still lived next door, and yeah, it was really cool. Like her garden was just immaculate, but she'd come and help for, a hand here and there because her kids weren't always around to, be there to help her. And that's awesome.
yeah, and that's it. And that's all it needs to be. You're right. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. It's to
Mm.
whatever works for you as an individual. And sometimes you'll have time, and other times it's okay not to have time as well, and to say, hey, actually, I'm on the needing end rather than the giving end.
Mm.
Um, and to be
And being
okay
able
with
to
that too.
accept that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hard, isn't it? That's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I
Very
know I've
hard.
definitely had some barriers around that over the
Yeah.
years that I've had to work through. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, volunteering. I mean, you've got community gardens or different community
Yeah.
groups that you can be a part of. So it's kind of in the same vein as volunteering, but more so that you're going to get maybe a little bit more out of it. I suppose is probably not really the best way to say it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more involvement there. There's working
Yes.
bees, perma blitzes, things like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just those light-hearted catch ups, permaculture at the pub, those sorts of
Yeah.
things. Like find your people, and go and just
Totally.
connect with them. It might just be that you change someone's day, week, month, year, life. Who knows? Just by having a
Mm.
conversation with them, and you have
Yeah.
no idea of the impact that you can make. So
Mm.
just giving that time, and again, we're all busy, and sometimes, and I've done it too. Like there's a social event on, and you get to that point that you've got to go and get ready and go out, and you're like, oh god, I don't want to people, I don't want to have to go and have conversations and
Mm.
put on my smiley face. But every time I felt like that and I've gone along, I have felt better for it at the end. But
Yeah.
there's for some reason, because we're all so busy, there's some resistance there. And I mean, I suffer from
Mm.
it. I don't know, do you get that as well?
Yeah, and like I'm thinking as you're talking, maybe the art of fair share and maybe permaculture more broadly is just to slow down, you know,
Yeah.
slow down and commit to less so that you can say yes to more things that matter, and slow down, think about what you really appreciate, and to slow down and not consume and be part of nature. Like, really, at the root of it, it's just being more conscious and slowing down a little bit.
I love
I
that.
don't know,
Say
just kind of,
say no to say yes. I like that.
yeah, say no to say
Yeah.
yes. Like, what can you just take off your commitment list because it's not a top value for you?
Yeah. And, at one
Um,
stage, maybe it had been, or you were
yeah.
doing it as a favor for a friend, and you've just kind of fallen into that it's
Mm,
expected of you now.
yeah.
So, yeah, maybe reevaluating, yeah, where you want to be spending your time.
Mm,
And that might be with yourself too. Like, that's okay to
yeah.
give yourself a fair share of your own time, and not feel guilty for that too. I know as
Yeah.
mums, sometimes,
Yeah.
especially when they're little, you really value that time to yourself. But at the same time, the minute you get it, you almost feel guilty for having that time to yourself.
Mm.
Um, so being generous with your own time for yourself as well.
Yeah.
What else have we got on the list there? We've got sharing time. So things like doing collections from local supermarkets and grocers. So
Yeah.
basically doing food rescues and things like that.
Yeah.
Again, there's various different reasons that you could do that. Helping different groups, you can do it. I do that for the chickens here. What the chickens don't eat goes into the compost, goes into the garden. I grow more food, and then I share that food. So again, that's quite circular.
Yep.
What else have we got on there, Elise?
Share your space. I think that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
When we spoke to Anna and Kelly, going back to them again, and their tiny forest on a private property, it's just nothing I'd think to do. Like, I wouldn't think to have a community space on my property. It's just not the way my brain operates. But it really challenged me, and it really made me think, how can we share space, or how can we do these things so that people can access them?
Yeah, it is interesting. It challenged me a little bit too, because I think I'm a little bit insular in that
Mm.
fact too, where I've had to sort of expand my thinking around it's mine, it's my space, it's my property, it's my whatever. To go, well, actually, it's not mine. I don't own it. It is, it is a place that I'm living and I'm the custodian of at this point in time of, the world's existence. And, I'm here for a fly's fart of a time. And why can't I bring in as many other people as possible to help
Yeah.
support this piece of land and to nourish this
Yeah.
piece of land, and for them to take nourishment from it in whatever form that looks like. So I was a bit the same. It was like, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I had a giggle as well. I came home from work one day when he was working for council, and there was a local farmer who'd gotten his property surveyed, and council's land overlapped his land in certain bits by, like 20, 30 centimeters or something like that. And he was having this massive hullabaloo. And I was like, how much land does this guy have? Oscar's like, oh, like hundreds of acres. I was like, and he's worried about 30 centimeters, like on a fence line that he probably never goes near. Like, are you for real? Like, we really get caught up in our own shit sometimes that you don't take stock and go, oh, why am I even worrying about this? Or why can't I just, give this time or space or whatever away more freely? Like, we just kind of, I don't know, get caught up in the narrative of what we tell ourselves or whatever it is. But yeah, I think sometimes we need to just kind of go, are you for real? And just kind of, check ourselves.
Yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. And with that too, like on the list, we've got, if you've got room for someone to live in your home. And that was something that was really challenging for me. I remember years ago, I met someone who they were hosting like overseas students. And so they always had an overseas student or two living in their home. And to me, that was so foreign. I didn't grow up in that way. Like, we would have friends over occasionally, but my mum and dad weren't big socializers in the home. Like, they would go out to socialize. So we weren't, a family that entertained people. And I'd have my friends from school stay over occasionally, but more often than not, I would do the same as them. I would go out. I would stay elsewhere. So to have strangers living in your home, and that was just like, that blew my mind.
Retro suburbia goes into that a little bit. And when I read that, I was like, wow, back in the 50s, when even my grandparents, they moved to Australia and they shared a garage space with another family from another family's home, because that was done. Like, that was so done. And sharing houses, like, right up until, I don't know, my mum was in primary school. They then bought a house with another family and lived with another family in this house, all of them together. And that was just such a done thing. We
Yeah.
don't do that anymore,
No,
you
not
know.
not not I suppose culturally, certainly for us,
Mm,
there's certainly plenty of cultures, within all around the world as well, but in Australia
mm,
too, that is very normal for them. But
mm.
it's
But
I'm
that
with
wasn't
you.
that
It
long
was like
ago, you
it
know.
wasn't.
My That's maybe what, 50, 60 years ago that was a
Yeah,
done thing.
a
And
generation.
I've actually met a lady, yeah, I met a lady the other day, and she's like, oh yeah, when my daughters move out, I'm gonna like let these rooms go to, low income families. And I was like,
Yeah,
what? Like, and it really blew my mind because I
yeah.
just
Are
I
you going to
don't
be
think
okay?
about things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I just, and not necessarily low income, she just, students and all kinds of people. And I was just, it's
yeah.
just
People
not
who,
something that I've really thought about.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, we've had those conversations here too, because we've got Mitch still at home, but Tam and Jay have they've got their own lives, and they've moved out. So yeah, we've got some spare rooms, and a couple of times, like, we've had those conversations of, do we rent the rooms out? Do we trade the rooms? Do we, say to someone, hey, if you've got some skills, kind of like woofers,
Yeah.
but not necessarily, going, through that program. We may as well, like, we've talked about it, but and I have to admit, it's my own biases and my own fears that
Oh,
have
yeah, me
stopped me
too.
from doing it. It has,
Yeah.
and that's something that I've got to work through. Um, because you hear all the horror stories, but you don't tend to hear the amazing stories of the amazing connections that people have made and the lifelong friends and the difference that
Mm,
these people have made in your life and you've made in theirs. So
mm.
I think
Something to
there's still
think
something
about.
on the cards for us, but
Yeah.
not right now. We're still working through that, but I
Yeah.
think it's such an admirable thing to do. Yeah,
Yeah. I think when we sit in those zones that we feel uncomfortable in, that's often when we have the most growth as well, and we kind of come to new understanding. So I think it is really important to do.
yeah, it is. It is, and
Mm.
sometimes, yeah, you got to sit in it for a little bit, and sometimes you really got to marinate.
Mm. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that saying. I'm telling myself that again now that I'm actually back at the gym, because yeah, I'm at the stage where I went to lift a bag of feed
I
the
am
other
very
day, and it was,
uncomfortable.
yes, I'm very, very uncomfortable. But I went to lift a bag of feed the other day, and normally I'm okay. Like, I can just, I lift it, throw it on my shoulder, and then carry it into the shed. And I went to do it, and I thought, oh my God, what? They're making 30-kilo bags now or something. This is ridiculous. And I looked and went, no, they haven't made it any bigger. It was me. And I went, you know what? Even though I do a lot of work around here, I am at a stage and age where I need to focus on, being strong and being fit.
Mm.
And yes, I have decided to, yes, go back and to do that. So
Good
yeah,
on you.
I am now very comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Is there anything else we want to talk about? We're coming up on over an hour.
Oh my goodness, this is a long. Usually these are short ones, but we've been gabbing on
I
and on.
know. What are we talking
Um,
about, Joe?
I think I just wanted to touch on money as well, because we talk about fair share.
Oh yeah.
And I know that money can sometimes, again, especially in that permaculture space, can be a little bit of a taboo subject, because it's like, oh, we don't need
Mm.
money. We all, love each other and hug each other, and we swap food and we're all perfectly fine. But that's great if you were living in a really small, specific community. But the most of us
Yeah.
have mortgages,
Mm.
or we need to pay rent, we have car repayments, we have to buy food to supplement our, what we grow. So if you do have a little bit of extra money, and I'm not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you've got an extra $2 in your pocket and you go past
Mm.
someone and they're asking for some money, it's no skin off your nose to give them two
Yeah.
bucks. Or if you're buying a coffee and they've got a program for pay it forward, or even if they don't, offer to buy
Yes.
someone else a coffee.
We did that.
You
Yeah,
know,
our local
do
coffee shop had
yeah,
a little thing that you could pay for a coffee, and they'd put it up on a board, and we used to do that regularly. I really enjoyed doing that. It made me warm and fuzzy.
yeah, that's it. And it's a good thing. Like, it's not a total selfless act, in the fact that, yeah, you're still getting something from it. And and that's okay as well. I love that. Like if I can make a donation somewhere, like I the other day walked past the Surf Lifesavers. They're doing their fundraiser. I used to be a surf lifesaver when we lived on the coast, and I walked up, and here I am, like I'm really showing my age. I had $10, and I sort of handed over $10, and he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, we can't take money." And I went,
Yeah,
"Huh?
they don't.
What? Like, what do you mean
It's
you can't
really
take money?"
weird.
Yeah, they said we can't take cash anymore because, obviously it's a security issue and an accountability issue. So we only take card. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm like, well, I'll just buy $10 worth of your tickets because I'm doing a raffle. And then,
Yeah.
he talked me up. He was a good salesman. So I bought, 5 times that amount. But I went, and I sort of walked away going, oh, shit, I feel like I've been fleeced here. But I went, no, you know what? It's going to a good cause.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy the tickets to win. It'd be great if it did, because it would be able to help, do a whole lot more, but, what we want to achieve as well.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my purpose for it. I didn't actually realize that they were selling raffle tickets when I went over with the $10. I just saw them there and I went, they're collecting money. Cool. You know what?
Yeah.
I've got this in my pocket. If it comes out of my pocket and I don't use it on something, is my life going to be any worse off? No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I love do that at that point. Yeah.
I love the pay it forward meals. Like we often, especially when we all had really little kids, if I made a lasagna, I'd make 2 and take it to a friend. But also with our preschool, we used to do big food drives, and food drives were a big thing in our local area because there were a lot of families that needed it. So we'd have a box at the front foyer, ended up moving it to the back where it was a bit more discreet so people could access it a bit more, where you could put, chips or canned goods, like anything that had a good shelf life. And there was a local little drop-off point as well that you could take it to, and they had one of those low-cost supermarket almost things for people who needed to access cheap food. So we'd often do food drives, and also just making extra food for our friends and that kind of thing. That was something that we did a lot of prior to van life, which I'm looking forward to getting into again, because I really think that's a nice way to pay it forward and do that fair share.
Oh, it really is. It really is. And I think it's something that everyone can do. It's easy to do. It doesn't extend it doesn't extend you a whole lot, but it's something that makes you feel good and it makes someone else feel good, and sharing the love.
Those book libraries, those community book libraries, I love those too, sharing things around with that. A book can bring someone so much joy and reprieve from the day-to-day, or, especially kids' books for, people who can't afford to buy books, and that improves literacy and the knock-on effect of that. So I'm a big fan of sharing books around as well.
Absolutely. And books are something that just can last an absolute lifetime. They can just keep going on and on and on and on. I love when you get a secondhand book or a third or fourth hand book, and you see someone's name's been written in it.
Yeah, it's inscribed.
It might be like 1962, and it was Mavis Smith or something like that.
Happy birthday, Jack.
Yeah. Like it's so nice. Like even like our dining table, I think you saw it when you were here last time.
Yeah.
A really big timber dining table. So we bought that off a guy again on Marketplace, and got it, he was just selling it because he wanted to get rid of it. Beautiful big timber table. But when we got it home, like my husband was saying, we'll sand it back and we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll get it in the same sort of country style as the rest of it. But when we looked at it, it had impressions in the top of the table of homework from years and years and years. So there is spelling lists on there, and there are maths equations on there. And I said to him, we're not touching that. That has history. That has soul. That has come
so
from,
nice.
Years of someone's family sitting at this table doing what families do. And I don't care if it's a total mismatch. We are not changing that. Like, that is staying. And we love it. Like even now when we sit down and we have dinner, and, we're sitting there and having a chat, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't see that word before, or, oh, hang on, let's do that. Let's do that math equation there and see what it is.
If it was correct.
If it was correct, we'll write to them and tell them they got it wrong.
Oh, no.
It's
it
nice.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I think that's it. I mean, it's been a really long episode, but
I know.
Fair share, it is such a bit, like, when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, fair share. Like, what is there to talk about? Like, just share things around and don't be a hog. basically. But
yeah,
there's so much to unpack. I mean, we only just, really touched the top of it, especially when it comes to global. There's so much more to unpack there. But again, I just want to remind people that it's okay to just do what you can do, and you don't have to do anything else because someone else tells you. And for fair share, like, it can mean so many things to so many different people. It's how you interpret it, and it's not what someone else tells you. And that was something that highlighted it to me when we were doing research for this episode. And, we know what fair share means to us, but it's like, okay, what does fair share mean to other people? What does that look like on a practical level and a metaphorical level? And it was really interesting that there was a lot of people out there, shooting, like, it should be this and it should be that. And it's like, well, no, I don't agree with that. I think that it is what you want it to be and what is right for you.
Yeah. It's a lovely place to end on.
I think so.
So to keep the conversation rolling, we'd love for you to join us in our Facebook group, the Practical Permaculture Hangout. We'll put the link in the show notes if you want to jump on there. Tell us what you think fair share is. If you have any other ideas about how we could contribute or others could contribute to fair share, that would be great. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Practical Permaculture Podcast. We hope this podcast has given you some inspiration, confidence, and has helped you in your Permi journey.
Head to the show notes for all of the resources mentioned in today's episode. I'm not sure how many resources we mentioned. We'll have to go back through. If you like this podcast, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share. And if you didn't, that is okay as well. We know that you'll find your people. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.